Hi, I'm Paul Wright. Thanks for joining me for this presentation of potentially dangerous and ineffective exercises. The aim of this presentation is to inform you of my opinion as a physiotherapist and former bodybuilder of some of the dangerous exercise that are still being used in some gym programs. Hopefully I'll challenge your thought pattern and make you think that some exercises that we might have thought were safe may not be as safe as we thought. I'll also show some other alternative exercises that you may be better off using. If you do have any pain or injuries, please see a physio or sports physician before completing any of those exercises. Hope you enjoy the presentation. Okay, well, welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. The presentation for this evening is potentially dangerous and ineffective exercises explained. I've had an interest in this from a lot of different perspectives over the years. I've been a competitive bodybuilder. I'm a physiotherapist, so I look at exercises to a certain extent a lot differently now than I used to. And if it makes you feel any better, almost every exercise I talk about tonight that is potentially dangerous, I've at some stage done in my history. So don't feel bad if you're still doing them now. The problem is if you know a bit of information and still do it, then it becomes an issue for us. Now tonight's presentation, there's kind of 5 different things I'm going to go through. I'm going to talk about how firstly you can identify a potentially dangerous exercise or an ineffective exercise. What things will make in your mind, will make you think, gee, doesn't quite sit right with me. When I see an exercise, and some people say to me, Paul, what do you think of this exercise? And sometimes you look at an exercise and you think, there's something just not quite right about it from what I know about physiology. So I'll show you some things you can work on that will give you those clues. I'll then go through a list of what I think are potentially dangerous exercises, ones that I think have fundamental flaws in them. I'll give you then a list of what I think are ineffective exercises, ones that I just think are a waste of time. They just aren't worth the time spent doing them. You have better alternatives. And I'll always give you an alternative tonight of what is a better exercise. So I'm always very aware of taking things away from people. You take all these great exercises that they've been doing for years and don't replace it with something, they get a little bit unhappy with you. So I'll try and give you an alternative all the time. I'll then give you a list of what I think are tragedies. A tragedy from my perspective, an exercise that is a sensationally productive exercise, but there's just something about it that is a little bit on the dangerous side, which is why I think it's a tragedy, which is some of the great exercise of the past, but there's a couple of flaws that we need to be aware of. And finally, I'll give you some exercise that I think are more technique dependent. Great exercises, but they're dependent on how good or how experienced the person is or how good their instruction is. That's kind of the brief of the exercise I'm going to go through tonight. Okay? So firstly, how to pick a dangerous or ineffective exercise. So what have you got to look for? The first thing I always look for is, does the exercise keep the muscle under tension for the majority of the joint action? So does that exercise keep the muscle under tension for the majority of the joint action? The classic example that I always refer to is something like a dumbbell kickback. Let's say the person's here with a dumbbell in their hand and they're doing a simple kickback exercise. They may have their hand on a bench or they may have their hand here, but they're doing a basic kickback with a dumbbell. There's so much space in that exercise where not much happens. Gravity's acting straight down, there's a pendulum movement that happens half the time, and I'm sure you've seen people do this exercise where they basically accelerate the weight, and this is kind of how the exercise looks. There's so much of it that isn't really dependent on the muscle doing the work, it's a bit of a waste of time. So my first point, as I said, is to find exercises that give you tension through a large amount of the available joint range.